Good day and welcome to CDI Talks. My name is Anton Shekhovtsov and I'm the chair of the Center for Democratic Integrity, an Austria-based NGO that analyzes attempts of authoritarian regimes to influence politics and societies in Europe. Given the current tense situation over Ukraine, I've recently traveled to Kiev to learn more about the Ukrainian perspective, Ukrainian views on the crisis. One of my most insightful meetings was with Alya, Shandra, a very well-known Ukrainian journalist, civic activist, and editor-in-chief at Euromaidan Press, an English-language website that provides news reporting on Ukraine-related issues and developments. One of Chandra's recent publications is a research paper titled "The Surkov Leaks: Inner Workings of Russia's Hybrid War in Ukraine" that was co-authored with Robert Seeley and published by the Royal United Services Institute. Alya Shandra kindly invited me to her home and we talked about her research, Russian political warfare, and Western support for Ukraine. Here's our conversation. As always, I invite you to like this episode and subscribe to our channel to receive notifications for the future episodes of CDI Talks. Alya, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. I would like to ask you and start our conversation with the reference to one of your publications about Surkov leaks. You co-authored, I think, this report with your colleague. Could you please tell me what this report was about?
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Anton, to be on your show. So the report was about 3 tranches of leaks from the office of a Putin top aide, Vladislav Surkov, who was he was called the Great Cardinal of the Kremlin. Vladislav Surkov was the man who was in the first stages of the Russian-Ukrainian war and during Euromaidan also tasked with the goal of keeping Ukraine in Russia's sphere of influence. Despite these emails being covering a time period that is relatively far away from us, 2013, 14, 15, and a little bit 16, they are extremely valuable for understanding what is going on today because they are our empirical evidence of how the Kremlin thinks, how it wages its political campaigns in Ukraine, how it manages occupation administrations, and what this hybrid war is actually about.
What are the major takeaways from these Surkov leaks?
Well, if we are to refer to this weekend's announcement by the United Kingdom government that it allegedly exposed a plan to instill Russia's plan to instill a Kremlin-loyal government in Ukraine that will be headed by a Ukrainian ex-MP, there are actually very many ways that we can interpret this based on the Surkov leaks. Very many people in Ukraine saw this announcement as absurd because Murayev is a very minor political figure. But the thing is that what we see from the Surkov leaks is that the Kremlin does not actually make its bets on the major pro-Russian political party. It made this mistake in 2013 when it placed its bets on the Party of Regions that eventually stopped implementing the Kremlin's desires. And we see in the Surkov leaks that the Kremlin places its bets really on very minor political figures, helps them conduct their election campaigns. And Murayev, it's very plausible that Murayev is actually such a figure and that he is part of the Kremlin's wide-scale campaign to subvert Ukraine and drag it back into Russia's sphere of influence. We see in the Surkov leaks that Russia exploits every single weakness of Ukrainian society that it can find to bolster support for, if not an overtly pro-Russian agenda, but at least for a Eurosceptic agenda.
My own idea is that for Russia, probably for Putin's Russia, an overtly pro-Russian leader in Ukraine would be quite problematic because it will antagonize, well, quite a significant part of the Ukrainian population. I think the more useful head of the Ukrainian state, from the Russian perspective, would be a person who would declare neutralist agenda in foreign policy, saying like, we don't want to be with Russia and we don't want to be with NATO or the EU. We want to be completely independent. A person with the sort of this neutralist agenda, that would be, I think, more useful. I mean, I'm talking only hypothetically, of course, and also this neutralist agenda, it is also fake. because any neutralist agenda for Ukraine means that it will be part of the Russian sphere of influence. There is no other path. And for Ukraine, which is sandwiched between the West and Russia, it cannot be neutral. It's not Switzerland. When Switzerland is a country it's surrounded by quite friendly liberal democracies. Ukraine cannot afford being neutral in this way.
Exactly. But that is why specifically Russia keeps promoting this idea. We also saw in the Circle leaks that it is a major point for all of the candidates that Circle supported.
From the Ukrainian perspective, do you see any developments in Western responses to Ukraine, the crisis around Ukraine, Russia's aggression? Is there a development, evolution, or what do you think about this?
I think in the light of the recent military so-called escalation, despite the fact that the number of Russian troops has actually remained quite stable on Ukraine's border for years, basically this was a bit of a move of Russia to test the ability of the West to respond. So it's like a testing maneuver to see how the West will act if actually there is an escalation. And I'm afraid that that Russia got the signal that the West would not respond in a unified manner. The West is divided over what to do with Ukraine. We see this from NATO's response. We see this from response of NATO partners such as Germany, which is blocking the shipment of weapons to Ukraine, even from NATO ally states. So this is one development, I think. The recent development is Russia's escalation as a means of testing. Then also but what is actually gives hope is the response of the UK, which was very much ready to send weapons to Ukraine and already has done this. This is met with great enthusiasm in Kiev and very big gratitude. And of course, all help from other allies such as the Baltic states. It is very welcomed and we are grateful for this. And also, over all of these years, the West has acted rather predictably to Russia's aggression. We condemn something, we express great concern, we maybe mull some additional measures and sanctions, but we actually don't adopt them, or if we adopt them, they're very limited, and then it all continues. So the question is, have we actually done anything to surprise Russia? Have we done anything to keep Russia on its guard and to say that we are ready actually to respond, that we are ready to take the lead?
From the Ukrainian perspective, where do you see weak spots in the EU? What countries or what country is the most problematic in the sense of, providing little support for Ukraine? I know that currently Ukraine's foreign ministry is not very happy with Germany, and you also mentioned Germany. Do you think it is a real problem?
I think it is, because of the position that Germany has in the European Union as an unofficial leader of this union. I think because of the great economic power that Germany has and the great connections to Russia, basically. Ukrainians were very disappointed with Germany's decision to push forward Nord Stream 2. Not only Ukrainians, of course, the Baltic states and Poland as well. And I think really there's a great deal that we do not understand in Germany's approach. How German leaders can think by any appeasement they will move closer to a peace. It just doesn't work. Appeasement does not work. Of course, there are other countries that are traditionally pro-Russian. Well, France also has expressed skepticism towards helping Ukraine. So France is another large locomotive of the European Union that is problematic. But I think that it's Germany right now which is espousing the most questionable statements for Ukrainians right now. And right now, the thing that Ukraine really needs is the West's solidarity to back it while it is defending itself. We are not asking for NATO troops on the ground. We're not asking you to fight for us. We're just asking for your support. We're facing a quite stronger militarily stronger enemy. We are willing to fight, but we need your support.
In the West, some people would say, why should we support Ukraine? Is Ukraine, in a way, redeemable? Is it if it becomes part of the West, will it bring anything to the West? Because all alliances, they are based on the mutual interest. Of course, we know how Ukraine benefits from moving closer to the EU, to NATO, to the West in general. But what does the West what will it have from this development? What are the benefits?
Well, I can understand why people in the West are asking this question when their news reports, they focus around the war and some horror stories about corruption, corrupt Ukrainian officials and war. And of course, I think the larger story of Ukraine over these 8 years since the Euromaidan revolution is largely being unseen, which we actually try to compensate for in Euromaidan press by illuminating the story of the larger picture, the larger story of Ukraine, what its society is going through, what it wants. And it is a story of a very painful recovery from a post-totalitarian society. A society that has been scarred by history and by its history of being in the Soviet Union, which is actually, it has a profound influence. It is just such a lesson for Western societies to learn how they should cherish their democracy and avoid any authoritarianism by all means, and how they should cherish the freedom that they have. We have a society that wants to build a functioning democratic country right here in the land where they live. They don't want to emigrate. They want to build a functioning society here. And just think about it. What is better for the EU, even if Ukraine does not become part of the EU? Is it better for the EU to have a malfunctioning pro-Russian mess on its borders? Or is it better for the EU to have a functioning democracy, resilient democracy, strong democracy on its borders? Yes. I think it's self-evident that the more stable, functioning, well-developed democracies there are in the world, the more stable and peaceful world it is. A democratic Ukraine is in the EU's interests. It is in Ukraine's interests. Even if Ukraine does not become part of the EU, it is still in the EU's interest to have a strong, democratic country on its border. And as an example of the determination of Ukrainian society to actually build a functioning country here, despite all the odds that they face, despite all the resistance of the post-totalitarian oligarchs and all of this dysfunctionality. We can see, for instance, the small group of activists that are pushing the anti-corruption and judicial reforms. They have faced so many obstacles in their path, but they do not give up. Each time that something goes wrong, each time that the government puts spokes in the wheels, they find another way, they continue because they believe in the future of their country. And I think that as long as there will be people like this here in Ukraine that are driving their country forward despite all the odds, then Ukraine will succeed. We just need a little bit of support at this crucial moment in time.
On this very positive note, I want to thank you, Alya, for this conversation and wish best of luck in your work in the media space and elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Anton, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you.